So there's two aspects that I'm going to focus on today when it comes to travel. One is business travel and one is commuter travel. What I should say from the outset and make it clear is that we're on the same journey as everybody else on this call. I don't have the answers. It's going to be an honest assessment of where we're at and what we have done, but primarily looking at the challenges and what our next stage is to help us find ways to overcome these challenges. We've been really successful at things like catering, retail, reducing our print, reducing our waste. We've got over 80% of our contracted staff who've received carbon literacy training. We've made huge strides in terms of energy efficiencies. And even in terms of the art we put on our stages, just tonight we've got a scratch night in our studio theatre, which is solely focused on environmental sustainability. So we've made great strides. And it actually meant that we were one of the pilot venues for the launch of the Theatre Green Book. As I say, though, travel is perhaps the hardest aspect of all. Okay, next slide, please. So one thing that I would say on business travel, which is where I'm going to start, is that the first thing when we started considering this is that we lacked any meaningful data. And so it was important for us to start addressing that. And the slide that's on the screen now, or should be on the screen now, is the Theatre Green Book tracker. So this is the very, very useful tracker that's built into the Theatre Green Book framework. And it was our starting point to try to get an idea about what our emissions were through travel. So hopefully you've all seen this, you all understand it, but basically you put in your name, your description of your travel, how many miles it is approximately, and it will then give you your carbon emissions. I thought that would be fairly easy to start rolling that across the organisation, but little did I know some of the pushback that I would receive. There were concerns about how onerous it was, and there was also concerns about the likelihood of people forgetting to complete the table. And actually that second point was a reality. People were forgetting to fill it in. There was also a certain amount of skepticism from some that this was about reducing business travel. As we know, business travel is something that many people enjoy as part of their jobs. They see it as a perk. For many, it's an essential aspect of their role. But we really needed to make people aware that it wasn't about limiting it for unjust reasons. Because of all those above points, what we've done is actually roll out a 3-month trial across 2 departments, the theatres programming team and the visual arts team, to establish how feasible it is to roll this out across the organisation. What this slide shows, and you won't be able to see it in too much detail, is our results for those 2 departments from July to September. Oh, sorry, it's just for the theatres programming team. You can see over that period of time, their carbon emissions was 720 kilograms. Now, we found that it was actually really easy to use this because the form does it for you. The challenge is, though, and still remains, getting people to actually fill in the in the information. And then if we move on to the next slide, please. Here, rather crudely, and I do apologise about the presentation of it, is the table that gets sent over once you plug in that data. And what you can see there is that there are 2 main areas of transport for the team. One is train and one is car. Now, it is good that they're using the train over the car because obviously the emissions are far lower. Primary reason for that is, 1, we encourage people to travel by train as opposed to car. And 2, the team were travelling to London and Edinburgh because it was during the Fringe Festival. So that is the information. And that's really the practicalities of how that system works. We can just move on to the next slide there, please. Because of the skepticism amongst colleagues about the feasibility of that, we've actually trialled our own system, and we're currently in the process of analysing which is the most efficient and most accurate. So this was led by the finance rep within our green team, our environmental and sustainability team. They came up with the idea of tracking travel against departmental nominal codes. and it captured the information for both advanced bookings and expenditures. What we've actually found is people seem to generally remember to claim their expenses as opposed to filling in the form on the other version. And so we are finding, or we think we are finding, that this gives us a far greater understanding of the true travel that is taking place. As I say, this is an early stage indicative set of results. They're not comparable to the previous slide on the basis this is the entire organization. What we now need to do, and it's a work in progress, is to compare the two to hopefully see that we get similar results in terms of accuracy, and then we need to decide as an organization our best way forwards. Can we move on to the next slide, please? Looking at commuter travel, this in a way is perhaps even harder, but it's very much, again, at the early stages. Just move on to the next slide, please. Okay, so for any of you that don't really know the location of the northwest of England, the red circle right in the very middle is, broadly speaking, where the Lowry is situated. And the blue circles are the locations of some of our staff, where they live and where they commute. Most of those people on there, they commute every day into the building. The furthest away is Halifax, and that's 40 miles. So that's someone who, as a necessity, as part of their job, they travel in 40 miles one way and then 40 miles going home every single day. Now, that person is very skilled. They're an expert at what they do. They're an industry leader in what they do. And it is essential for the success of the Lowry that that person works at our organisation. Just moving on to the next slide, please. What we did, again, we've realised that we were short of data, was that we did a pulse survey amongst our staff to get an understanding from them of how they travel to work. And perhaps not surprisingly, 69% of people say that they come to work by car, 15% by tram, and 7% walk. Perhaps one of our biggest challenges with that statistic is that we offer free car parking for all our staff and volunteers. It's something the Lowry has done since we opened 25 years ago. It's a huge incentive when it comes to recruiting and retaining staff, but it's hardly an incentive when it comes to encouraging people to use alternative options. But given our non-city centre location and staff coming from the suburbs and surrounding towns, for many, driving is the only viable option, both in terms of time and cost. So it's something that we're really having to wrestle with. Next slide, please. This here is a map of Greater Manchester, and TFGM is Transport for Greater Manchester. Sustainable travel is a huge initiative of the city region. What you will see from this chart, if you can, the middle section, the bit right in the middle of the graph, that's Manchester city centre. Whilst there is excellent transportation from the towns around Manchester into the heart of Manchester city centre, it is very difficult to get out from those places. So if you look at Bolton, to get from Bolton into Manchester city centre out to Salford would probably take someone in the region of 90 minutes to do that journey. If they were to drive and the traffic's on your side, it's about 30 minutes to do it. Just giving you a pure example about the challenges that we face. As I say, the positive news is that there is fantastic transportation within Manchester, but it doesn't necessarily work for everybody. Next slide, please. So in terms of what we're doing, because I would, in a way, painted a fairly negative picture, but a very honest assessment, there are things that we are already doing. So we operate a bike scheme where people can have a salary sacrifice to purchase a new bike. We are currently bidding for money to improve cycling facilities, which would include secure storage, improved showering facilities, and a bike repair station. We've actually offered, through Transport for Greater Manchester, cycling proficiency training. We are looking at an electric vehicle scheme which runs in a similar way to the bike scheme. The challenge with that is that it can be seen as divisive because you have to have a relatively high baseline salary to be able to take benefit of that. And so actually some of the staff have pushed back on us offering that at the moment. In the staff car park that I mentioned, there are electric vehicle charging points. And we do encourage staff to car share, but it's often not practical. But we have had success on that amongst our volunteers, who perhaps time is not quite so critical for them. We do allow staff to work at home from 2 days out of 5, but of course that is very much role dependent. And something we're looking to do, and I know Siobhan will talk about this in a bit more detail, with the tram provider, we've talked to them about trying to benefit from the corporate discount scheme. That is a discount scheme for our staff to be able to get cheaper and reduce travel. The problem at the moment with the scheme is that it needs to be a minimum of 100 staff need to sign up for it, which at the moment is just unfeasible for us. So we are hoping that they will change that and become more flexible. Next slide, please. So excuse the pun, but we are really at the start of the journey when it comes to transportation. It's an honest assessment, what I've spoken about today, and business travel at this stage is solely based on the data collection. That's all we're doing at the moment, although we do actively encourage people to travel by tram and train over car. I should say one other thing just to conclude with, we couldn't do any of the work that we do without the support of the EAST team, which is our environmental and sustainability team. And more so than that, until the Theatre Green Book was launched and until the Arts Council put sustainability as one of its 4 key pillars, I couldn't get this on the agenda with my fellow directors at all. Now it's actually quite high on the agenda and it gives a real chance to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tony. It's really, I think, so important to hear what it's like in a relatively large-scale venue, just to get the data together, just the motivating staff to track and share, just so that you start to understand what is it you're actually looking at in terms of your business, commuting, travel. So thank you very much for those insights, and it's great to hear that it has made it easier to put it on the agenda. It has normalized the conversation to ask the question, what are we doing around sustainability? I'm going to hand straight on to our double act at the Wales Millennium Centre. Steve and Alex, over to you.
Thanks, Lily. Yeah, it's great to be able to come and speak to everybody today and just give you an overview of where we're at in the Wales Millennium Centre down here in Cardiff. And thanks, Tony, for that presentation. Very insightful, I got to say that. I'll describe myself as a white, middle-aged male wearing a blue shirt with brown, slightly grey in hair on my head, and my colleague Alex, who's alongside me.
I am Alex. I work business operations support at Wales Millennium Centre. I'm a white European male in his 30s with dark hair and an Aztec print shirt.
Very nice as well.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate
that. Can we just go on to the first slide, please? I think just to give you some context around the Wales Millennium Centre for anybody who's not really aware of where we're positioned and what we're about as an organisation, it's very similar to the Lowry. We are also a Millennium Centre sort of project based in a very industrialised part of Cardiff on the coast, which was part of a redevelopment project back in the early 2000s, where obviously the area was the main Docklands area for Cardiff. We also received funding from the Arts Council of Wales, so we're quite fortunate to do that, and it actually equates to 10% probably of our income, and sustainability, as Tony's mentioned there, sits high on the agenda with the Wales Millennium Centre senior leadership team as well. So it's important for us as an organisation to sort of have a strong focus on that, and the Theatre Green Book has certainly helped us get that embedded within our organisation and give that a structure for us moving forward. The Wales Millennium Centre is basically a 1,900-seat theatre, and as within the building itself, we've got also a 250-seat theatre, recital hall and dance house and cafes and a cabaret venue. We're also home to the Welsh National Opera as well, which sits within our footprint, and 8 other arts organisations and private businesses. So it's quite a large footprint. We've got approximately 130 members of staff, permanent members of staff, but any time there could be between 300 and 500 freelancers working with us. So obviously our workforce does fluctuate quite significantly depending on what we're dealing with at the time.
I was just trying to recall in terms of audience figures, I think it's just over 1 million a year or something. So it tends to be obviously very, very busy and subscribed.
We get about 1.5 million, as I say, audience members through the actual building as well. So that's something that we obviously are going to be focused on. Go to the next slide, please. So this then highlights how far we are outside of Cardiff. Obviously, Cardiff as the capital of Wales, obviously a busy, vibrant sort of city centre, but we're actually positioned very similar to Lowry, approximately 1.2 miles, or it's about a 23 to 25 minute walk, depending how fit you are, outside the town centre. So the town centre obviously hosts the main sort of Cardiff Central train station, and obviously we've got a small, what we call bay train station, which is approximately an 8-minute walk away from the venue, and the trains at the moment are scheduled every 15 minutes to that venue. But however, it is a bit of a challenge for people who actually get to the city centre and then have to commute down to see us. So encouraging sustainable travel is a big thing for us.
Yeah, I think we felt that, and I'm sure all venues will have this in common, if there's any justification to jump in a car, people will sort of readily take that. So they are currently sort of improving the infrastructure, as we'll move on to later. But yes, just trying to encourage those audiences to come down to us in a sustainable way. That has been the challenge.
We've got
next slide, please.
Next slide. Yeah, what we've got here is just an overview. Again, it's just emphasising where we are. The slide on the left is where we were 150 years ago. As you can see, nice waterways there. It'd been great if you could have ferried guests down to us. It would be sustainable to be able to do that. But obviously, we know as we are on the right-hand side, and as you can see, we're sat, outside the city centre. You've got the city there in the distance, and we are the domed building behind sort of the P-head building, that red brick building there in front of us, right next door to the Welsh Parliament, which is positioned there on the right-hand side.
Next slide, please.
So what we are focused in on is how we're obviously looking to improve is working using the 3 Green Book sort of framework, using the operations tracker to calculate sort of our carbon emissions. So obviously managing travel and transport and understanding, obviously getting a benchmark where we're actually at is very important for us to be able to understand that. What we've done is engaged with an external company to support us on that analysis, a neutral carbon zone, and they've been able to generate sort of a carbon insight report and a carbon reduction plan for us, which we're trying to sort of work through. But as we explained, the challenge is to get everybody on board within our organisation to get their focus where it needs to be is difficult, and pushing people in and pulling people in the right direction is always a challenge.
Yeah, we're certain to aspiring to get to that point that you've reached, Tony, and kudos to you on that, because we have found it quite difficult to get those buy-ins across departments, get everybody to present their information. So as Steve's saying, we engaged with Neutral Carbon Zone, who are carbon management specialists, and the detail they required, that was much more of an overview, broad strokes. We could do it on a financial basis, as opposed to having the more granular detail required by the Theatre Green Book and their operations tracker. But we're certainly looking to get there, and we are in that process at the moment. Next slide, please.
Yeah, what we're looking at here is obviously an example of a post-show customer survey that we carry out after every show. The data is collected and then presented on a quarterly basis, so we get some decent analysis of where everybody's at, how they've actually travelled to us, and obviously giving us a focus then in relation where we need to sort of target. And this will lead on for us, for me to explain shortly what we're actually doing with this. Obviously, the analysis, it shows our weaknesses, where we need to improve. For example, the proportion of bookers using public transport rises for 28% for a matinee audience, suggesting obviously the scheduling of local trains and buses plays a significant role in relation to sort of sustainable travel and audience travel, which is something that we're obviously focused in on at the moment, bearing in mind the number of audience members that we get traveling to us. Yeah.
Next slide, please.
How we're looking to improve is, we're looking to build relationships with local authorities and transport providers, in particular Transport for Wales, which is obviously a government-backed organisation within Wales. We're building relationships with those, and obviously they're the ones who operate the rail infrastructure within sort of the city centre area and across Wales and a broader piece. We've recently entered into a partnership agreement with them, advertising for audiences around the shows and sustainable travel, and explaining to people, although the Wales Millennium Centre sits outside the city centre, people's perception would be that it may be difficult to get down to the Bay Area, emphasising that you can travel sustainably, but also highlighting from a WMC perspective the challenges we've got around matinee performances and the evening performances in particular, I should say, in relation to sort of scheduling of those trains and things.
Yes, absolutely. I think that does speak to Tony's earlier point there of the importance of politics, legislation, local authorities, and cooperating, working alongside those to improve those sustainability links. Next slide, please.
So currently, we're looking at future developments in and around sort of our venue. There's a lot of development going on down here at the moment. Alongside us, there's a 17,000-seat arena that's currently being built, and obviously there's going to be another building alongside the arena, which is a stone's throw from where we are, which we're going to be involved with as well from a future development perspective. But what that's allowed us to do is, with the links with Transport for Wales and working with Cardiff Council in particular, building those relationships, we're able to sort of be involved in what we've got at the moment is a Cardiff Crossrail project, which has been implemented. We're able to influence what the future looks like, which is going to be key to us and critical to us. We referenced the cliche, obviously it's a journey, yes it is, and we're able to influence that at the moment, right at the early stages. So I accept we're in a fortunate position, but it's building on the relationships we've got politically within sort of our area and recognising that and being able to influence that. So that's what we're working on at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's so important. It's taught us a lesson about not being insular in our approach and really sort of getting out there into our local communities, speaking with those governing bodies, finding out exactly what's going to be happening, where the future is going. So as Steve's saying, we can get in at ground level and try to make that work for us in the long term. The next part we're going to talk about, obviously we don't want to tread on Tony's toes because he was covering off more the staff element, but we were interested to look at schemes that were potentially unique to us here at the Wales Millennium Centre. So if we can go on to the next slide, please.
Again, looking at obviously the staff aspect, from our perspective, obviously we again, due to relationships we've got with obviously Welsh Government and National Health Wales, which has obviously devolved to Wales uniquely through Welsh Parliament. There is a scheme called the Healthy Travel Charter Wales, which has been driven again by the Welsh Parliament, which sits next door to us. We've become part of that group or that body or an organisation, and obviously we've pledged a series of actions against us as a public or partially funded public body to sign up to demonstrate the commitment, obviously supporting walking, cycling and using public transport, which links into the Transport for Wales aspect I mentioned earlier regarding low emission vehicle use. So that's something we're working with National Health Wales on as well, which is again publicly funded body.
Absolutely. Next slide, please. And that's just to round that off then in terms of those commitments that we've signed up, that sort of pledge that we've taken over the next 3 years. It's also really handy in terms of we were on a call 2 days ago perhaps, and there was actually a gentleman speaking there from Transport for Wales, and we've been dealing with another point of contact at that organisation. So again, just in terms of networking, keeping abreast of local sort of developments and finding those individuals who are key to talk to. Next slide, please.
Yeah, and as part of that scheme, what we've got is obviously we run it twice a year. Obviously, it's called Dr. Bike. It is, but it just encourages people to travel sustainably to us, whether through work or we advertise, obviously, for people to sustainably travel here. If you're an audience member or if you're coming to visit us as an organisation, because of where we're positioned, as I keep saying, slightly outside the city centre. So this is a scheme that we run where obviously we service the pedal cycles for staff in particular, but we do advertise sessions. Obviously, they're quite limited, but nonetheless, people are encouraged to book into it, and it does work quite well. We obviously got the BBC National Orchestra Wales sits within our footprint, although it's not part of our building. They sit alongside us. Welsh National Opera as well. A lot of their staff travel in by pedal cycle, and it's a really, really sought after scheme from internally with us, isn't it?
Yes, it's one of those things that's not sort of high maintenance or overly complicated, but when we do roll it out, it does prove to be exceptionally popular. And yeah, I think as Steve's saying, it also works in terms of staff morale. I think it's a really good initiative to do, an example of something that's not too sort of onerous on us.
But, you know, talking about travel and transport in general, though, from our perspective, I think, you know, looking at how we can influence that with both audience members and staff, we're quite fortunate, again, from a Welsh perspective, in that we're able to link in with these National Health Wales, Transport for Wales, which is government-backed. So we're able to politically engage with these organisations to get buy-in. They recognise us, in fairness, and how we can impact, obviously, on carbon, reduction of carbon within Wales, and obviously being sort of regarded as a high-profile organisation within Cardiff as a capital city, but obviously an iconic building. They do support us in relation to that and hear our voice and help us and support us in and around that. But what I will say is, it's, you know, like everybody's aware, transport and travel is so difficult to influence. It's a long-term sort of initiative, no doubt about it, but it's making sure we've got the analytics in to see how we move that dial and move it sort of positively towards us in our favour. And that's it from ourselves. Thanks.
Thank you both so very much. There's such rich insights in there. A couple of things that just struck me. Clearly, that engaging with your political and civic partners and those relationships being absolutely key, but also kind of recognizing that it is such a challenging thing to change people's travel behavior, that you might be better off spending that energy that you have on those relationships with your civic and political partners and influencing much larger change around public transport and so on, than trying to convince one more staff member to come by bike. So, you know, thinking about what you have control over and then just putting your energy in the place where you're going to have that long-term impact just feels incredibly smart. Also really good to be reminded of the health impacts of taking sustainability seriously. And it's really great to see that Healthy Wales Charter kind of giving permission for that and creating a space for those conversations in your part of the world. And that obviously connecting through to staff morale as well. So yeah, just some really good stuff, because sustainability is personal and professional. You know, most of us will be riding a bike not just to commute to work, but also in our free time. So these things it's a really interesting dynamic how you kind of motivate and support behaviour change in the right direction. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm very excited to share Siobhan's insights from Newcastle Theatre Royal and their partnership with local transport infrastructure there. Siobhan, over to you.
Thanks, Ellie. I think the slides are up, great. So my name's Siobhan, I am Director of Operations at Newcastle Theatre Royal. My pronouns are she, her. I am a white woman in her early 40s with reddish brown curly hair, and today I'm wearing a leopard print jumper. It's great to be able to join the conversation, and I'm going to say it, we're at the very start of our journey in terms of sustainability, but I'm looking forward to telling you a little bit about our free metro travel scheme. So for those of you who aren't aware of Newcastle Theatre Royal, the Theatre Royal is a Grade 1 listed building that was built in 1837, surviving a huge fire in 1899, 2 world wars and a 1980s restoration project. We're a charitable trust and presented 64 productions and 391 performances across a range of genres last year. We have an extensive creative engagement programme focusing on talent development, schools and community, and we are an independent charity and receive no regular funding. Our theatre is an island theatre built on a standalone block at the top of the Grand Grey Street in the city centre, with rows on all four sides of the building. It makes our loading in and out quite tricky. The main auditorium seats 1,247 people over 4 floors, and we welcome on average 300,000 people into the building each year. Audiences travel for up to 90 minutes to come to the Theatre Royal, with our catchment area reaching down to Teesside and up to the Scottish borders. Newcastle Theatre Royal is a local cultural landmark. It has survived and been conserved for 188 years and is so weaved into the landscape of the North East, it even features on our hospital curtains. On to the next slide. So to our free Metro travel scheme. This partnership with Nexus, the Metro travel operator, has been running for over 20 years. The scheme allows anyone with a valid ticket to see a performance to travel for free from 2 hours before the show and 2 hours post-show by showing their ticket at travel stations. The Metro network connects Sunderland, Gateshead, North and South Tyneside and Newcastle International Airport with the Newcastle City Centre. The scheme also covers travel on the Shields Ferry between North and South Shields and is redeemed by showing digital or paper tickets to teams working at transport hubs. Audiences arrive into Monument Station, which is just 21 metres from the theatre's main entrance and closer than any public parking facility. We have a contra agreement with Nexus, and in return for this travel scheme for our audiences, they receive a complimentary business membership, which includes 40 tickets per year, 8 room hire sessions, branding presence on digital and print media, staff ticket deals, and invitations to corporate events. This costs the theatre around £5,000 per year. The impact of this scheme is that over the last 5 years, unfortunately we couldn't pull 20 years worth of ticket sales data, but over the last 5 years we have offered free Metro travel to over 1.6 million people, supporting them to travel in a sustainable way and make a trip to the theatre more economically affordable, with travel cost savings of between £2 and £6.70 per journey. Nexus now offer this scheme across multiple cultural venues in the region as part of their own corporate responsibility plans. Currently, we don't have any data or mechanism to gather that data to demonstrate how many people have utilised this scheme, as travel is redeemed simply by showing a theatre ticket. But this is something we're working to develop going forward. To the next slide. Recognising this interconnectedness of socio-economic, inclusion and sustainability considerations has widened the lens for us here at the theatre, and we're starting to think about sustainability not as a standalone isolated strategy, but cohesively with inclusion, financial resilience and engagement. This particular free Metro scheme removes a cost barrier to drive attendance, making theatre more accessible and boosting revenue. We are able to serve communities without access to a car, disabled people and low-income families and individuals. We are encouraging theatregoers to reduce their carbon emissions through shared transport and by utilising renewable energy transport, supporting the local authority net zero by 2030 target. With this different and more lateral perspective, we're now also looking at what else we're currently doing that has or could have a positive impact across multiple strategies, including sustainability. Next slide. This type of scheme is really important for the North East for multiple reasons when you understand some of the recent stats from the 2021 census and the commitment from the local authority. 21.2% of people are disabled, which is the highest percentage in the UK. 31% of people do not have access to a car and rely solely on public transport, which is the highest in the UK outside of London. 25% of people live in poverty and 35% of children live in poverty. 28% of people live within the walking distance of a metro station, and they take 36 million trips on the metro annually. There are 162.4 million bus journeys annually, with 60 stations and 77.5 kilometres of electric metro track. Within the regional context and commitment, Newcastle City Council has set a net zero target by 2030. The North East Combined Authority has a transport plan covering 2021 to 2035 with a specific focus on electric travel, expanding connections across the region and supporting active travel. We have a city centre clean air zone in place that places restrictions on specific vehicles. And like most cities, city centre parking is very expensive. And we've seen over the last 10 years a reduction in the number of parking spaces within the city due to large scale developments. So the people of the North East rely heavily on public transport for multiple reasons. And the investment in infrastructure from the local authority and expectation on transport operators to also commit to those targets presents us with the prospect to generate essential data and further develop our sustainability, inclusion and engagement strategies for our audiences. Final slide. Although we recognise what a positive scheme this is, as a presenting theatre, we are very much at the start of our sustainability planning journey, and there is much more we can be doing. Our next steps are to find ways to generate informative data related to this scheme and to other areas of our sustainability plan, explore options to expand the scope of this scheme. We're in early talks with a bus operator about a similar offer, and we're considering how we leverage their plans for their government funding to meet our audience needs. We are considering how we make a public commitment to and support North East sustainable strategies, working with the local bid and the City Council. And just, you know, in support of what Lily has just said, leveraging those relationships is so important. We're very fortunate. We already have strong working relationships with both. Whilst we receive no public funding from the local authority, they are our landlord, so there is a vested interest there. And finally, we plan to review and align sustainability, audience engagement and inclusion strategies, recognising that interconnectedness and opportunities for further multiple charitable objectives. And that's me. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Siobhan. It's really fascinating to hear how long that scheme has actually been going, because it really points out how often sustainability is part of other drivers for growth, for corporate partners, for all sorts of access and inclusion. It's probably lost to the mist of time exactly what the motivators were 20 years ago, but we can see how powerful it is now as a narrative and a driver for multiple intersecting positives that you are addressing through that. So yeah, really fascinating. And Tony's got a question for you. Obviously this is now running in a while, but how difficult is it to renew that agreement every year? What do you get any pushback? He gets pushback saying if he does it, every theatre, gallery and stadia will want to do it.
Well, we're in a slightly different position, I think, because it's part of Nexus's own strategy to support cultural venues, and so there are other venues that also benefit from this scheme. So they're taking a regional approach, and it's only an annual agreement. So it's not like we have a sort of a 10-year long-term agreement and it is renewed every year. They haven't given any indications that it's hanging in the balance at all. But every year we have to go through the same process of you know, proposing this, and so far they're fully committed and they're not making any noises to say they wouldn't be. But I think we are benefiting from the fact that within the region we've got the very recently established North East Combined Authority and the city centre targets, that we've been through a huge transformation programme in the city centre and developing the city. And also we are fortunate we're pushing through an open door, I think, really, and I recognise that not everybody's in that position.
Thank you. Yes, I invited Tony and Alex and Steve in particular because they both face similar challenges, and it was interesting for me, I thought, for our audience to hear what it's like to not be in the city centre but be a large venue with audiences coming from a very wide footprint and as well as staff, of course. So I think it's really interesting to compare your different stories. But Tony, maybe it's about aligning with other non-central venues and actually asking as a consortia. So you're not alone, but you've already kind of answered that question of who else should be in the gang. But yes, anyway, I've got another question, so I'm going to quickly ask Annalena from Stanley Arts. Do you ask the audience via surveys if they use the scheme or if it makes them more likely to book a show? I think that's for Siobhan as well.
Unfortunately, we don't ask any questions about this right now, which is something we really recognise we need to do. We need to start asking people how they're getting here, and we don't have that data, but that's absolutely on our roadmap to start asking that question.
Yeah, be powerful to have it for sure. As major venues, larger venues, I'm aware there's quite a lot of smaller venues on the call as well. Where would you suggest smaller venues start? based on your experience, particularly that staff engagement side of things? Tony, you're not muted, so I'm going to come to you first.
I think it's communication, collaboration, having the dialogue, starting the dialogue, getting it on your director agenda so it becomes part of your strategic objectives. We've got great ambassadors in our, I mentioned when I spoke, our environmental and sustainability team. When we launched that, they are people by their very nature that are passionate about this. And actually they kind of like infiltrated through the organization and are the ones that are on the ground rather than me. People don't listen to me. They're on the ground talking about this all the time, whether it be in a staff meeting, over lunch. That's the way in which we found real dividends. And also putting it on our staff app. We have a staff app, so internal like intranet, really trying to push that initiative on there as well. But it's got to be a collaboration and an open conversation.
Yes, collaboration is definitely key. People can see that it's about everybody working together. Alex and Steve, you mentioned that although that's the 100 staff, you can have up to 500 people working in the building, and you've got other organisations based within your footprint as well. What would you say to us from learning from them? What advice would you have for smaller organisations looking to do this work?
I think, again, I'm just going to emphasize what Tony has said. You've got to be honest, it's communication is absolutely critical across the organization, and using the internet and good news stories by people and share, people talking about it and getting people engaged with it. We've noticed that as soon as we get an idea here, obviously, you share that idea, it builds momentum and it spreads across the organization, especially with like freelancers and contractors, when obviously we get those peaks and troughs with staffing numbers. People come into the organization aware that an initiative is running, is taking place. People get on board with it, and sustainability is something that we find everybody really, really keen to support and engage with.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of smaller venues, again, it's that element of communication and networking being key. Those 8 smaller organizations who sit within our footprint, pretty much all of them have reached out to us actually as a sort of, is there any way you can point us? And we do direct them to Theatre Green Book, to toolkits that are available out there, and have those conversations. So I think, if there is that opportunity to make those links and speak to people who have experience in it, to absolutely do that.
We've got one more question, and I think it was Tony who showed off the TGB tracker and its limitations. So you've also, innovating with the nominal code linked tracker. But there's a question in from Jess Taylor, just asking about how do staff calculate the kilometres and miles they're travelling on a train? This information isn't always publicly available. And this is great feedback for us at Theatre Green Book as well, in terms of thinking about how we can make the trackers and the tools that we offer more user-friendly. But has that been a particular barrier? Have you found ways around? Is that, yeah?
No, I think we probably just do a bit of a Google search, I think. Hopefully not AI Copilot because of the environmental impact, but even a Google search, not great. I think staff just do that, to be honest with you. No more scientific than that.
I think Trainline does tell you the kilometres and the CO2 as well. I think there are different travel booking. I think it depends what service you're using for booking. I'm just imagining that. But it's a really good bit of feedback, Jess. Thank you so very much. And perhaps a brilliant note to end on. And I've just clocked, we've clicked over to 1 p.m. here in the UK. So yeah, feel free to unmute and give our speakers one last thank you and round of applause. And thank you all for joining us.